For more on Donald Trump's transition to the White House, we're joined by Washington Post political columnist Philip Bump. Philip, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Appreciate it. We watched over the last couple of days that Mike Pence is now taking over the transition team for Trump. Does this effectively kind of move Chris Christie out of the inner circle, or what's with this?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of cabinet appointments and a lot of positions that can be filled in the White House. But obviously, Chris Christie has this cloud over him. The whole Bridgegate scandal is very unpopular in his home state of New Jersey. Two of the people involved in that were just recently convicted of crimes for it. So there are a lot of reasons why Chris Christie is not a political asset at this point in time. And one thing about Donald Trump is while he values people who are loyal to him, he's not always loyal back to those folks. We've seen that in the past. I think this may be an example.
What about including his children and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, in the transition team?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of questions there. I mean, you heard Earl Burnett a little while ago talking about a potential conflict of interest. These are theoretically, they are going to be running the Trump businesses. And while we've been talking about a blind trust, it's not really a blind trust because Donald Trump obviously knows what the businesses are. It's not as though they're liquidating all of the Trump assets and putting the investment into something else. So we'll have to see. It's a totally abnormal situation, obviously, for a president, and we'll have to see how we navigate it.
We've been watching as these protests keep erupting across the country, third night in a row. Donald Trump took to Twitter one way and then the other way. You wrote about this yesterday. Does he need to heal the country and maybe use social media to do that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it is very much the case. So the people that are out there on the ground, they're people who are very unsettled by what they heard from Donald Trump, from his campaign rhetoric, which, again, he hasn't walked back from. And Donald Trump's response to it was to blame the media and to call it somehow unfair. I mean, this is a guy who won the Electoral College vote. He's probably going to end up losing the actual popular vote by at least 1 million votes. And it really is incumbent upon him to figure out how he demonstrates to communities that are concerned about his presidency that he will not leave them out in the cold, and I'm not sure that first tweet did much to that effect.
What do you make of the indication already that he's willing to compromise on the Affordable Care Act?
Right. I'm not surprised. I mean, the repeal and replace slogan was always a good slogan, particularly for Republicans who knew that President Obama wasn't going to actually sign any law repealing it. But, it's very popular to have pre-existing conditions covered and for people to stay on their parents' plans. The problem is it's also very expensive for that to happen, and it's not clear how you're going to navigate those two things.
However, you had a lot of voters who voted for him because they wanted something like this to happen. He turned a lot of blue states red. Does this alienate those people now at this point, or how does he move forward with that?
Well, I think the one thing Donald Trump can rely on is his core base of support has never wavered at all, and I don't think they're going to waver now. The question is, there are a lot of people who voted for him because they didn't like Hillary Clinton. Are those folks going to remain excited about the choices they just made if he starts backtracking or I mean, like this drain the swamp thing? He's hired a bunch of lobbyists, or he's talking to a lot of lobbyists about what he's going to do. Like, are those the sorts of things that are going to keep?
Yeah, he said no lobbyists, and now he has people on the team.
Things change.
What do you think the most critical appointment he's going to make here as he heads to the White House is going to be?
I would say probably chief of staff.
And what do you make of the names in the list so far?
Sure. So, I mean, Steve Bannon, who's the head of Breitbart News, is one of the people that's being talked about. I mean, look, we also don't know. Donald Trump puts a lot of names out there, and his people put a lot of names out there. We're not really sure about who's actually in the mix here. But Steve Bannon is a very controversial figure who will do a lot to keep people from feeling confident about Donald Trump's presidency. Reince Priebus, the head of the RNC at this point, is another name that's in the mix. I think that would send a very different message, and I think it's a critical choice for how people perceive the beginning days of Donald Trump's presidency.
All right.
Always a great conversation. Philip Bump, thank you so much for being with us. Tomorrow morning on Face the Nation here on CBS, John Dickerson's guests will include former presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders and former House Speaker Newt Gingrich.